Are you tired of spending too much of your hard-earned money at the supermarket? Are you dreaming of farm-fresh eggs, homegrown veggies, and homemade everything? Well, welcome to Ditch the Store, where we break free from supermarket dependence and take back control of our food and household essentials. I'm CJ, and I'm here to show you that life is too short for store-bought eggs. So let's get started. G'day everyone, and welcome to another episode of Ditch the Store. CJ here on her own again today, episode 154, and we're talking about best chicken breeds for beginners. Now, I've talked about this in the past, but I've talked about it more from the point of view of the different types of breeds that you can get and, heritage versus hybrid, things like that. This time I want to talk about the nuts and bolts of it, really what is best for beginners, because if you're just new to chickens, heritage breed birds are lovely, but there are some that are really finicky when it comes to health and things like that. So by the time we finish talking today, I hope that you are going to have a good understanding. I've picked 4 that I think are really good birds for beginners. And what we're going to talk about is health, how their health impacts whether it's easy for you, their temperament, because not all birds have a great temperament. Arakan roosters, which are the first ones we got, which was silly of us. We probably should have got something very easy to start with. But Arakan roosters can be very aggressive. We're very lucky at the moment. We have some very calm roosters. Which ones lay without burnout, or which ones, depending on what you want, whether you want high yield, but you don't care if it doesn't last forever, or longer, slower yield, and what to avoid for your first flock. It comes down to the fact that not all chickens are created equal. And, if you know a little bit about chickens, you would know that there are hybrid chickens that have been developed purely for egg laying purposes. And that's your Isa Browns. They're really, they are just built to lay eggs, and that's it. Whereas you've got heritage breed birds who've been built and raised and genetically changed for different purposes. And in some cases, they are dual purpose, so they are good for eggs and meat. But the beginner egg laying ones I'm talking about today, most of them are just specifically around egg laying. But the thing is, if you're a beginner, you don't need a high maintenance diva type bird. And that's what I'll refer to them as, divas. The divas of the chicken world are the ones that have health problems, have temperamental problems, make lots of noise in backyards. So people get shitty with, their next door neighbour for having noisy flocks. They won't go into the roost at night. They've got weird food issues, things like that. You don't need those for your first chickens. That would just be, it's just asking for a pain in the ass and asking for failure, because you'll end up going, oh my God, this is too hard, I can't do this. And then you'll give up. And I don't want that. I want you to realise that keeping chickens is actually quite easy once you get the hang of it. So the main things that we're thinking about are health issues, temperament, reliability of eggs, because no point having an egg layer if there's got issues with laying eggs, and or they take a long time to lay, or they have a long time during their molt, or things like that. Those kinds of things aren't things that beginners want to deal with to start with. You want birds that are very forgiving of beginners. If you do something wrong, or you don't feed them right, or something goes wrong with them, it's not the end of the world. So before I start naming the breeds, the things that I was looking at for best breeds for beginners, because I have people that listen all around the world, North America, Australia, New Zealand. I've got some people in South Africa. Hi, South Africa. I've got a few people in Europe, believe it or not. I shout out to you guys, because you're obviously listening to me speak in English. I don't know whether whether Spotify has a translation thing, but more than likely you're listening to me in English, in which case, thank you, because I don't speak a second language. I'm terrible. I wish I did. I think it would be a very handy skill to have, but I know when I travel through Europe, a lot of people over there speak multiple languages. So shout out to those guys. So the 4 things that I'm looking at are hardy in varied weather, because it doesn't matter where you live, the chickens are outside and they're going to have to cope with that weather. Low incidence of common health problems. So your birds that would be considered hardy, that's the phrase that most people use in relation to a lot of these birds. Calm temperament. If you're a beginner, you don't want a bird that's aggressive. You don't want a bird that's that can't be handled, because to start with, handling birds can be pretty scary. The first time the handy helper, I showed him how to carry a bird upside down. He was like, "Oh, is that not hurting them?" It doesn't. They pass out, the blood rushes to their head and they kind of like go to sleep. But it doesn't hurt them. You turn them back upside down, blood rushes out of their head, and they're back to normal. But if it's a calm temperament, it's easy to carry, that's going to and catch and do things with, that's going to be easier for you. And consistent egg production without extreme burnout. And I'll caveat that because one of the birds I'm talking about is very much a hybrid, and we'll get to that in a minute. So hybrid birds lay heaps because they've been genetically inbred to make them lay more eggs. Heritage birds tend to lay less, but for longer. And that's something to keep in mind. Now, hybrid birds are super easy, super easy. But heritage birds sometimes can have little things. Oh, excuse me. I'm going to yawn a bit. I'm recording this first thing in the morning. They can be a little bit tougher to manage. But once you get the hang of it, you're right. And the good thing is that whatever your first flock is, whatever you start out with, that doesn't mean that's what you're going to stay with forever. Certainly with Isa Browns, their lifespan is not as long. So if you start out with the really simple, easy Isa Brown, in 3-4 years' time, you might do a complete rehash of your entire flock. So starting with the obvious first one, the Isa Brown, which I think is called a Freedom Ranger or Red Ranger over in the States. It is a commercial brown hybrid, and the idea is that the way that it's genetically bred is if it comes out brown, it's an egg layer. So therefore it is an Isa Brown. God, words fail me for a second there. It is a female Isa Brown, which means it will lay eggs. Pull it. God, my brain was gone for a second there. So Isa Brown, what they are good for? Mass egg production. These guys start laying at about 20 weeks, 18 to 20 weeks, and they will lay an egg a day for the first year without a problem. After that, usually it's about 6 a week. But the thing is with the Isa Browns, and this, I've had Isa Browns now for 4 years, they die. They die and they stop laying. We've got a bunch up there at the moment. I need to segregate them and work out who's laying and who's not, because obviously as a working farm, we don't keep Isa Browns we don't keep any chickens if they're not laying, except for Agnes. Agnes will have a place here forever, as will both of her daughters. But they lay up to a certain point, usually about the 18-month mark. You'll notice that hatcheries commercial egg productions will sell off their Isa Browns. They're still laying, and they still might have a year's worth of laying in them, but it'll be sporadic. It'll dwindle down from 6 a week to 5 a week to 4 a week. But they mature really quickly. So if you get them as day olds, you know that you've got 18 to 20 weeks and you're going to have egg production happening. They are very calm compared to some of the heritage breeds. The Isa Browns, even the ones that we didn't handle, and we tried to handle most of them as day olds, but even the ones that we didn't handle aren't too hard to catch when it comes, like when we've got to delouse them and things like that. They are really calm and easy to grab. And Isa Browns are also very adaptable. They're hardy in the sense that you can stick them in a pen with a whole bunch of other Isa Browns and with other birds, and they will be fine. So they're a bird that can slot into a mixed breed flock without too much problem. And not all birds can do that. Some birds can get really bossy. Now, it's really important to note that, like I said, they lay heavily for the first year or two, and then after that it drops off, and what will happen is the bird will go downhill. What we notice is no matter how much we worm them, no matter how much we delouse them, they just look older. It's like they age quick. Their lifespan, I believe, is only about 4 years, so we've got a couple up there that how they're still kicking, I don't know, but there's a good chance they're not laying anymore given the numbers of eggs that we're getting at the moment. And because of my broken leg, I haven't been able to go up there and monitor them as much. Luckily, OJ, my son, goes up and does the chickens for me most days, but it's something that we need to kind of segregate them out and see who's laying and who's not, because they're almost at the end of their lifespan. But they are best for somebody who maybe isn't sure that they want chickens long term and they want to test the water, but they want a good, solid, reliable supply of eggs. It means that essentially you're only committing for 3 to 4 years to these chickens. And by the end of 3 to 4 years, you will know whether or not you are all in, chicken mum or dad, or whether you are not convinced still. In which case, you just, once your Isa Browns have fallen off the perch, go get yourself some more Isa Browns and try it again. That would be my hot tip. But from my perspective, we won't be doing Isa Browns again. I find even though you get that mass egg production, which is great for a commercial situation, they just seem to fall off the perch. And when I say fall off the perch, I mean die. They just seem to drop dead without any warning. And when they do stop laying, they just stop. Like it peters out for about 6 to 12 months, and then it just seems to stop completely. So second one on my list is one of my favourites, and we do have a few of these, the Australorp. Now, the Australorp was developed in Australia, and it was genetically kind of inbred to develop a bird that lays more eggs. So it's one of the higher laying hens in the chicken world. They were genetically kind of bred to suit an Australian climate. Now, that being said, everybody thinks that an Australian climate is super sunny all the time. There's always sun out. It's always hot. In winter, we get frost, we get snow. You know, yes, we're not blanketed in snow like our friends in North America, but there's been times here where we're sitting at -10 and it's Celsius, and the ground is rock hard and you have to go around and break the ice layer off the water troughs so that the animals can drink. We certainly don't have stinking hot sunny days 24/7. So Australorps were designed or bred to ensure that they were very hardy when it came to an Australian climate. They can handle the extreme cold and they can handle the extreme heat, and it does not bother them. When I say it doesn't bother them, obviously all chickens need shade when it's really, really hot, and they need wind protection when it's wet and windy. Wind protection and rain protection when it's wet and windy. There's very few chooks that are going to stand out in the rain, so having a shelter that they can go into when it's pissing down rain is vital. But Australorps are calm and friendly. I can go and pick our Australorps up. I don't know their background. The Australorps we have here were here when we got here, so they are over 6 years old now and still laying. They don't lay as much as the Isa Browns did, but they probably lay more than the older Isa Browns are, if that makes sense. So 6, 7 years in, they're still laying a decent amount of eggs. They have a good solid lifespan. Their lifespan is like ours are 7 years old and they're still going. Occasionally I think we have 15 of them to start with, and we're probably down to about 7. But, like I say, they're over 7 years old. So when you take that into account, that's a pretty good innings for a chook. And they will lay, so their molt period, with the Isa Browns, they have a fairly short molt period, but the Australorp also have a fairly short molt period. So you should only be off the lay 4 to 6 weeks tops. And the Australorps are usually back laying again, which means you don't have a huge gap in that winter period of no laying. Now, health-wise, they are very robust. I have not had an Australorp rather, who has been egg-bound. I haven't had any that have had any kind of foot issues. I've had Isa Browns that have had foot issues, but no Australorps. But none of those really painful kind of health issues that sometimes result in you having to dispatch the chicken. I've not had those with the Australorps. When they get sick, when they're dying, when they're going from old age, they literally just go downhill in the space of a couple of weeks and then they die. And then it doesn't seem to be any specific health issue that causes that. It is purely old age. They are best for families, cooler climates. They can handle the heat, but they also, excuse me, do very well in the cold climates. And they are better if you are sure that you are committed to the next 7 to 10 years of keeping chickens, because they will live that long. They're I like Australorps. I think they're good. My flock will go to Australorps from Isa Browns next time round, even though it's probably double the price to buy the Australorp day olds. We will go to Australorps, which hopefully will be this spring. We'll do a rehash of our flock, and it'll be 90% Australorps then. I just really like them as far as not having any hassle from them. Sussex. Now, I've only ever had a couple of Sussex, and we got them. They were kind of thrown in with the day olds that we got for meat birds, and we noticed that a couple of them were female and were Sussex. So we kept them, but the meat bird wise, they were fantastic, big chunky meat birds, which is great. Sussex are really good in that they are very reliable layers. They have been used previously in commercial settings as well for egg laying. And their personality is curious, but they are very manageable. They're not flighty. They're not the kind of bird that you really can't control. And like I say, they're dual purpose. So if you are interested in having a dual purpose bird, oh, I'm going to yawn all morning. If you're interested in having a dual purpose bird, they're a good one. They can also handle different climates very well. They're quite fine in the really cold and also in the really hot. They have a very strong constitution, and they have a less metabolic stress than heavy hybrids. So the Isa Browns I talked about, they don't last as long because they're just geared as egg laying machines. Sussex are egg laying machines. They are right up there with the Australorps as well, with laying a lot of eggs. But even though they are a hybrid, they're not. They don't seem to get as stressed, so they live a bit longer. So your lifespan for them is probably closer to 5 years, and they'd be laying during that period. And the last one that I want to talk about is the Plymouth Rock, which I love the Plymouth Rock. We've had Plymouth Rocks before, and they are such a sweet-natured bird. They're great for beginners in that sense. They are friendly. They will come up to you. They'll follow you around the garden, which is nice. You're not kind of having to chase them. They will come to you. Again, they are fine with weather conditions. And I think Plymouth Rocks were genetically kind of bred over in the States in the northern parts, so they can handle the cold really well. But they also handle the heat quite fine. But they're another one that's hardy. Never had medical issues. When I lost one Plymouth Rock to a dog attack when we lived at the old Little Farm, and the other Plymouth Rock, I think she just died of old age that we had. There was no medical issue leading up to it. She'd never been egg bound. She'd never had a foot issue. She'd never had, eye beak issues, croup issues, things like that. They just don't have those kind of issues. And they are really consistent layers. They're right up there because, again, they've been kind of modified bred to get them to lay more. I think some people in the States might use them as dual purpose, but I've not seen them used as dual purpose. They are a very steady bird, not dramatic. So, and in colour wise, they are black and white speckledy kind of colour. So if colour is your factor, then the Isa Browns are obviously brown. Australorps are black. The Sussex are white, and sometimes they have like a ring of black feathers around their neck. And the Plymouth Rocks are black and white speckled. They're quite pretty. Now, breeds to think twice about as a first flock. I've also put in this list the Isa Browns. If you don't want birds that are going to fall off the perch in 2 years' time, and you don't want that humongously high egg production, then probably don't go with the Isa Browns, or only go a couple of them. Don't get 6 to 10 if you're only a normal size family and you're not intending on selling. I would say 3. And you'll get 3 eggs a day. That's 21 eggs a week, depending on your egg consumption. 3 to 4 chooks is probably enough. Flighty Mediterranean birds. I was Googling and they keep saying Mediterranean birds. I think they mean South American birds. The Araucans are the blue egg layers that we have, and they are they can be very hard work. Their personalities are not always great. Their temperament can be really good, but they can also be peckers. They can also be, but like I say, we had terrible luck with some of our roosters, our Arakan roosters, where they would attack everybody, the kids, Shane, everybody. So if they're a little bit flighty, noisy birds, you probably don't want to start with them. You want the calmer, more sedate, more handleable chickens to start with. Heavy heritage breeds that lay late. If you're impatient and you want your eggs straight away, don't go with Brahmas or things like that. So Brahmas are the birds that we've just got in the last 12 months. They're a huge bird, big heavy set bird, great as a dual purpose bird because there's a lot of meat on them. They lay a normal sized egg and they're not prolific layers, but they are steady layers, but they're really good mums. They hatch out babies. Look, I'll hatch out babies quite easily. But we got to 28 weeks and I rang the guy that I bought them off and went, how long does it take before they start laying? And he's like, oh, around 30, 35 weeks. I'm like, holy crap. They took so long to start laying. Once they started laying, it was nice and steady. So, but some heritage breeds take 24 to 30 weeks before they'll start laying. So just be mindful of that if you're in a hurry for eggs. And I would say stay away from mixed age rescue flocks. Now, you might be doing somebody a favour and you might feel like you're contributing to keeping Isa Browns going, down the track. But if you're getting older birds from an unknown environment, you don't know what diseases they're bringing with them, if any. You don't know what medical issues they're bringing with them, if any. So for your first flock, I would say stay away from them because it's just going to be easier if you're not trying to manage a medical issue, an egg laying issue, a disease issue straight up. If you can avoid it, you don't want it. It's not that it's a bad thing. It's just not great for learning when you're first starting out. I don't want you to get disheartened. So what do you want to pick? That from a health perspective for beginners who are getting into chickens, practical advice from me would be to choose one breed to start with. One breed, all the same age. So if you're going to go Isa Browns, go Isa Browns. If you're going to go Australorps, go Australorps. But get them all the same age. So either pullet point of lay or day-old chickens, your choice, but same age. Buy from a reputable breeder. Most of the hatcheries in Australia, and certainly I think in the US as well, will take back anything that turns out to be a rooster that they've missexed when they've been doing it. But you can buy sex day-olds. So, predominantly just getting pullets rather than having any roosters in there, or you can get mixed unsexed, but you have to take your luck of the draw with whether or not there are roosters in amongst that. But most of them will take the roosters back. Ask about vaccination, and it may not be important to you, but for my egg layers, I do buy vaccinated birds because there's such a big flock, and because I want them to live for as long as possible. Having the vaccination process done means that I don't have to worry about a few very, very bad chicken diseases down the track that would wipe out the entire flock and probably prevent me from having chickens for some time before I could kind of clean everything up and get ready to go again. So do your research on the vaccination. I would never, after the whole COVID debacle, I don't push, you have to buy animals that are vaccinated. My meat birds, I don't buy them vaccinated because they're going to be the food consumption for my family, so I tend to want as less in the meat as possible. But long term, you have to make that decision that suits your family and whether it be vaccinated or not. If you're picking non-vaccinated, just be aware of all the risks that you are taking on board with not having vaccinated birds. Avoid mixed flocks early on is on my list, when I have mixed flocks now, I've got Australorps, we've got 2 Sussex still up there, we've got Arakans, which are blue egg layers, and we have the Brahmas. So we do have a mixed flock now, but it was hard work in the beginning when because I bought older aged birds, or didn't bought. I took, a woman was giving away birds, and I took birds that were older and put them in with my flock. And there were issues with diseases. There were issues with infighting and getting the pecking order right and things like that. So it's important. If you're just starting out, I don't want you to get overwhelmed and have everything get fucked up and go, oh, no, I'm not doing it. It was just too much. I'd rather you make it easier on yourself. So try to avoid the mixing of flocks early on. And don't overcrowd. If you don't need 10 birds, don't get 10 birds. If you've got one of those little igloo things that moves around your backyard that only fits 2 to 3 birds, well, only get 2 to 3 birds. Don't try and jam 5 or 6 in there. They'll get sick from it. And that overcrowding is what will cause the illness, because birds can't clean themselves properly. And birds are fairly clean animals. They will try to prune and clean themselves. So most of the kind of health problems that you would get in the backyard come from that overcrowding situation, or from bringing diseases in from somewhere else. But you can also have issues with poor ventilation. So you've got to make sure, where you want a waterproof and windproof coop and predator-proof coop, which we're going to talk about next week, you need to make sure that it does have good ventilation. Not drafty, but there needs to be airflow going through there, because and you'll know if you walk into your coop and you smell and go, oh, I can smell that ammonia smell, then it's not ventilated enough. And that's because the second thing on the list is wet bedding. If there's, when chickens poop, they poop and wee at the same time. And it all comes out the same spot and lands on the bedding that you've got underneath, and it will get moist. I love saying that word. At least one episode I try and say that word, because I know somebody out there is sitting listening going, I hate that word. So wet bedding, so you need to make sure that you keep the coop clean. Stress and overcrowding are the other two. And that comes from too many birds being in too small space. But it can also come from predators, or things that are perceived to be predators, family dogs, cats going around the coop. If a chicken... Now stop yawning. If a chicken sees what it perceives to be a predator stalking it, that can cause undue stress. If there's predator birds flying over, our chickens certainly, as soon as a wedge-tailed eagle flies over, they'll know and bolt for cover. So that type of stress can cause it. There's no such thing as a bad breed. So whichever breed you get is fine, but if you can make it easier on yourself in the beginning, then I would say try and aim for that. Now, egg numbers. Be realistic about your expectations. See what I did there? That's kind of funny. I know, I crack myself up sometimes. Realistically, with Isa Browns and Australorps and Sussex, what was the other one I mentioned? Plymouth Rocks. So 4 to 6 weeks per hen per week in peak season. I would say with the Isa Browns, you could say 7 eggs to start with in peak season. There will be a drop in winter. You have to expect that. Now, the drop in winter, this is my hot tip, is not to do with the cold. So you could live in sunny Queensland and have a drop in egg production over winter, and it's nothing to do with the cold. It's to do with the daylight hours. Now, that being said, in Queensland, your daylight hours are much nicer than our daylight hours are down here in southern New South Wales, where we're just getting to a point now where Shane and I are milking goats in the pitch black. And Handy Helper is definitely coming home from work in the pitch black. But it's more to do with daylight hours than cold. So you still will have that molt layoff period where they don't produce eggs. And also to remember, if you are starting with day olds, even if you're starting with point of lay pullets, first eggs will be inconsistent. So probably for the first 2 weeks, you might get what we call fairy eggs, which are the tiny, tiny little eggs. You crack them open. Sometimes they've got a yolk and everything in them, but they're really, really miniature. You might get some weird eggshells. You might get some weird egg shapes. And it's just that's the hen's body starting to adjust to laying eggs. So you just have to bear with that and use them as best you can. Most of the eggs are still fine. They might just take a bit hard. It might be a bit harder to crack them without getting eggshell everywhere. Or with the fairy eggs, you might crack it and it might just be all yolk and no white. That we've had that happen before. But don't be surprised when that happens, and don't be upset, and just understand that in a couple of weeks things will even out and you'll start getting a very regular, very consistent size, shape and type of egg. Now, what I want you to do, this is your action tips, is to sit down and write out a list for yourself. And these are the questions I want you to ask. And this is to help you decide on which one of those chickens you're going to pick. Do I want maximum eggs fast? No brainer. That's going to be the Isa Brown. Do I want long-term hardy birds? I would say the Australorps, but the other two, Sussex and Plymouth Rocks, also fall into that. Is temperament more important than output? If temperament's more important, I would be going Plymouth Rocks all the way. Their temperament is beautiful. Australorps, pretty close behind it. Isa Brown's temperament is, they're not, Isa Brown, it's hard to explain. They're not a friendly bird. The Plymouth Rocks are a friendly bird. They'll walk up to you. They'll follow you around. The Isa Browns won't unless there's food involved. If you wave food around, then they'll definitely follow you around. But what I mean is they're just easy to catch because they're very docile. You can walk up behind them and they don't run off. They're not scared of you. Whereas some of the heritage breed birds, you walk up behind them and they bolt. They know straight away. To them, it's you're a big giant and you're trying to catch them. So if temperament is more important than output, then you need to factor that in. And what climate are you in? Some of those ones are way more suited to cold than others. I think I said Sussex. Sussex are hardy, but Australorps definitely cope. They cope with our frost down here really well, and the Plymouth Rocks do too. So, and then I've typed myself up a match list. Fast eggs is Isa Brown. Balanced and hardy, you're looking at Australorps. Friendly and good personality, Plymouth Rocks. There's always going to be because they are really nice birds. And all rounder, if you can't pick, maybe look at a Sussex because you will get the steady egg production, and they are not flighty. They're probably the most flighty out of those four, and they're a whole lot less flighty than some of the other heritage breed ones. So they're a good one for that. So this is your plan for this week, because I really want you to start thinking about it, even if you're not getting them for autumn. If or if you're listening from Northern America, then I would say now is the time to do this. So sit down, get online, find your local hatcheries, go through, see what breeds they have, because they may not have all the breeds available. But if they have the breeds available that you want, I want you to ring at least 2 local hatcheries, if you've got 2 in your area that will deliver to you. Ask about hatch dates, ask about vaccination status, ask about what feed they're on, and if there's any kind of guidebook that they give to you. Some of the hatcheries give you like a cheat sheet for how to look after the day-olds or the pullets when you first get them, and start writing out a plan for dates, for coop finishing, for feed buying, for day-olds or pullets arriving. Write all that down. That's what you've got to do this week. I know everybody kind of just loves scrolling through Instagram and looking at chickens and things like that, but it's really important that you take action on this one. If you want chickens, now is the time to start that process going, and see how you go with which breed you're going to go for. And like I say, you might ring the hatcheries and you might have your heart set on Plymouth Rocks, and you ring the hatchery and the hatchery says, we're not going to have Plymouth Rocks for like 6 months. And you say, what else have you got? And they go, we've got Australorps. And you go, well, that was second on my list, so be it. Let's go with the Australorps. You don't need heritage birds to start with. If you do want heritage birds, I have done, I think, a podcast ages ago on heritage birds, and I'll probably do another one soon. Heritage birds are awesome, and once you are more experienced, then I would say heritage birds, would be the way to go. Like if you start with Isa Browns just as a starter bird to see if you're even going to stick to it, that's great. Once the Isa Browns start falling off the perch, that's when I would look at going to a heritage breed, and doing your research on which heritage breed is going to suit you. Now, that's it for this week. I'm trying to make these episodes a little bit shorter just so that we can get through like specific information. Next week, we are talking about Predator-Proof Coops, and I think that is really important because, as I said back in the last episode, if you are deciding to get your chickens set up, you need the coop set up before you get the chickens. Please don't get the chickens and then go, oh my God, now I've got to do a coop, because life gets in the way and it gets messy and then you won't get to it. But we will talk about it, and we'll talk about all the things that you need to know. Anyway, that is it for me for this week. Have a lovely week, and I will talk to you all about coops next week. Bye for now. Well, that's it for today's episode of Ditch the Store. If you're loving the journey to self-sufficiency, be sure to subscribe. You can also leave a review for us or share this episode with a friend who's ready to break up with their supermarket. If you've got questions or success stories, we'd love to hear about them on the socials. You can also find me at www.mojohomestead.net. Until next time, keep raising, growing and making. And remember, life's too short for store-bought eggs.